Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Trey Wells. I'm a front-end developer here from the great state of Minnesota. In this channel, we are front-end developers who care about UI. And today we have another episode in the Let's Build This Thing series. So I have found a design on Dribbble by Nick Rybat for 4 sets. And it is a navigation, right? So I chose this design for 2 primary reasons. One, as a front-end developer, it's important that you understand how you build navigations because they are pretty common. Every website has them. So it's important that we know how to build these things. And number 2, this one has a kind of like a mega nav kind of design going on. I thought it'd be kind of fun to build. I guess a bonus reason is like I love building stuff that's purple. I think purple is a great color, especially in UI because it does seem kind of rare. So that being said, if you want to follow along, I'm going to be coding this thing from absolute scratch in VS Code. So that sounds great to you. Go ahead and pop over your code editor and follow along. And I'm going to turn off my face and get started. So just a few little notes here. I do already have a few tabs open to kind of help out. One is just the design that I save a screenshot of just as a reference to make sure that we are designing this thing as close to the mockup as possible. My second tab is just a Google Fonts. I have gone ahead and try to pick a font that's approximate to the mockup. Again, I don't have the master design file, so I can't get exact, but I think this font is pretty close. As I right here, I'm going to click on Get Embed Code, and I'm going to copy this link that goes to the head of the HTML file. I am using a variable font here because we have the flexibility to be able to use any font weight between 100 and 900. That does include fonts like 435 and other random numbers. We're probably only going to be using 2 or 3 font weights, but I do think variable fonts are the way. All right, so with that, let me change to another tab. And then lastly, I use lucid.dev to source all my icons for mockups. Again, I'm not gonna be able to get the exact icon from the design because I don't have the design file, but I think these should be pretty close. So with that, let me go into VS Code and let me go ahead and create an index.html file. And if you didn't know, you can hold shift and do exclamation point and then click tab and it will scaffold out a bare bones HTML file for you. So let's go ahead and change this to let's build, oh my goodness, this thing. Oh my God, everywhere I type I want it. Dribbble navigation. Apologize in advance. I might have a few typos. My basement is absolutely freezing. It is not climate controlled down here, so bear with me. All right, so let me go ahead and paste in that Google Fonts reference that we have here. And then before I forget, let me go ahead and link a style sheet. So I'm gonna do a link, let's do CSS, let's do styles.css. And let me just create that really quick here, styles.css. And then, okay, so let's talk about this. So what am I going to do here? So this, I'm gonna put this inside of a navigation element or a navigation tag. Always do your best to use semantic HTML, right? It's very important for accessibility and it gives your document meaning. So we're going to create this navigation wrapper in a nav tag and it can go from there. We're also going to give this logo an ARIA label because I don't have the logo file. So I'm just going to type out the word Zeus UI. I'm gonna give it an ARIA label so that a screen reader does know what it is. But in a perfect world, I would have had an actual image SVG or something with no text on it. So there's that. So let's go and get started here. I'm going to open up a nav element here. And I mentioned earlier that we're going to have a few elements inside of here. The first one being a logo. So I'm going to open up an anchor tag, which will go nowhere. I'm going to type out Zeus UI. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have the actual design file, so that will have to be good enough for now. I'm going to give us a class of logo because it will have its own styles. And while I'm here, let me go ahead and open this up with Live Server so we can see the progress as we go along. Beautiful, love to see it. We know we are cooking. So let me go back to our Live Server. Let me make this the first tab. All right, there's that. And the design, we also have, let me get rid of this actually, I can just use this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total list elements that will be the primary navigation. So a little shortcut in VS Code is, let me open up an URL list, and you can do li times 5 and then go ahead and hit tab, no, scaffold out 5 empty list items. Let me do about us, and this is going to be solutions. It's going to be resources, and then pricing, and then contacts, right? Beautiful. All right. So we can see, or before I go on, let me go ahead and add this last link on the very end here. So this is going to be another link, which will go nowhere. The text is try for free, and there is going to be a icon in here, which I will pop in there in 1 second, but let me go ahead and give this a class of CTA. I think that should be good for now. So, okay, so let's go ahead and go to Lucide. Let me close this. I don't need this anymore. And click icons, and we want. I know we want a chevron, but for some reason, oh, never mind. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know if it's loading, but if I type in like chev, it'll only give me the up pointing one. But I guess now it worked out. So forget what I said. So we're gonna go ahead and click on this to copy it. And we want the SVG, and we have that inside of solutions, and then the other one is resources. Let me just go confirm that is what we want. Solutions, resources. Let's go to the design, solution, resources. All right, so obviously it's not styled correctly yet, but I hope you see the vision, right? So these call to action buttons both have like a double chevron. So let's go back to Lucide. Let's go ahead and click on chevrons right, copy SVG. So we're gonna go ahead and click space and pop it in there. And there's also going to be one inside of a nested mega menu, but I will just copy it from here when we need to use it a second time. So we are done with this tab. Let me go ahead and go back to the design that we are building, and perfect. So I always have this issue where it's because of prettier. If I paste it in SVG, sometimes it'll paste it on the lines weirdly, and I'll get like this weird like error state where it's like red. Normally to remedy this, I just bring the SVG to a new line manually. I'll close this SVG tag and then bring down the link, and that seems to work. Again, I'm not sure why that happens. I've not figured out a way to configure Prettier to automatically fix that for me. So if you know a way, please help your boy out. Leave me a comment so I can get rid of this thing. I do this a lot and it gets old after a while. So, all right, let's go ahead and build out our navigation. All right, so solutions is one of the ones that has a mega menu that's nested inside. So I think what I want to have happen here is like I want solutions to be, okay, so first off, this is actually not correct. Let me go on and fix my mistake before we go too far. These list items should also be wrapped in links, right? Because these are links. So let me go ahead and type A shortcut. It's going to go nowhere. And then this is what it needs to be wrapped inside of. It needs to be like this, right? So like each list item is actually a link to some page on this fictional website. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll keep those two here for now. Same thing here. Let me go ahead and move this. Let me wrap pricing in that, and then another one for contacts. It's gonna go nowhere. Let me get rid of this and then paste this in. Let me go ahead and click save. Okay, here we go. So for solutions and resources, we can handle this in a few ways. We could wrap solutions and resources in anchor tags and give it a pointer event none. And clicking on that link will just trigger the mega menu. I think a better solution is to make these buttons, because solutions and resources are not actually links. All they do is they trigger open a mega menu below the clicked on link. So with that, I'm going to actually wrap solution and resources in a button instead. So I'm going to open a button. I'm going to click save that. I'm going to do the same thing for resources. If you're using React, you can do something called, I think it's called like polymorphism. Anyways, you can output a specific HTML element based on some props. So in other words, if you know that this element has children and it's going to be a navigation parent, you can output button. Or if not, you can output link. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, don't worry about it. But just know that here, because I'm not using a JavaScript framework, I'm just going to create these manually, right? Solution and resources are going to be buttons, and I'm going to style them to look just like the other links in the navigation so that you can't tell the difference. But just know that semantically, because they actually open up a dialogue and they don't actually go anywhere, they should be buttons, right? They should not be links. So just keep that in mind for accessibility. Let me go ahead and click save here. Okay, so this looks good. We also need to, so as a sibling, all right, so I'm gonna do. The SVG is also part of the buttons. Let me go ahead and move that inside here. Space, that should help a little bit. Beautiful. Well, not beautiful, but you know, closer. Let me copy this SVG and put this inside the button. Okay, perfect. So now, semantically, this is how I want it. Now, a sibling to this button, I actually want to have our nested navigation. Okay, so let me go back to the mockup really quick here. So imagine that this is the button that we just created inside the solutions, and then this is going to be what we're creating right now. This is our mega menu for this specific list item. So how are we going to do that? Well, you can handle this in many ways, but I'm actually going to create another navigation in here. I'm going to give this a class of navbar underscore, whoops, oh my goodness, oh my god, underscore sub dash menu. Man, sorry about my type, my hands are freezing. All right, and how are we going to do this? Well, this whole thing is a navbar submenu. I'm actually going to have 4 different divs. I'll probably end up calling these nav submenu column, and this last one will let's call this one feature article maybe, and it's kind of go from there. So let's create 3 divs. I'm gonna do div times 3, and then inside of here, actually for all of these, so a little shortcut, if you hold Option in VS Code and click, you can move your cursor to 3. All right, you can add cursors wherever you click at. So we can type basically one thing and it'll copy itself 3 times. So I'm gonna give these a class of navbar underscore sub dash menu dash items. I'm still used to the BEM method of naming things, block element modifier. That's just kind of ingrained in my DNA. Like I always fall back to BEM, so it's effective. So usually whatever works for you, but that's what works for me. As a matter of fact, let's change these. All right, so again, in VS Code, if you want to select multiple of whatever you have highlighted, you can do Command D. So I'm gonna do Command D. I still want this to be column and not item, because this is going to be one of the columns, and then the items I actually want that to be the list items. So just bear with me. As a matter of fact, to make this simpler, let's just do 1 for now. I don't want to confuse anybody too much. So inside of here, we're going to have an H4. It's going to be called product. You can see that in the mockup. And then below here, we have a whole regular role in our list. So I'm going to give this class, the class of navbar underscore sub dash menu dash items, and I believe I had a typo. Of course I do. Tab, and then here we're going to have 4. I think you can do li with an a inside, and that times 4. Does that work? That's not what we want. Okay, maybe I'll do this long way. I don't want to mess up this with emit typo. So I'm gonna do a. This will go nowhere. This is going to be called use cases. Again, the nice little shortcut here in VS Code. If you hold Option and Shift and push down, you'll copy your selection on a new line. So I'm gonna do that 3 times. This one's going to be testimonials. This one's going to be features. This one's going to be user stories. All right, we're going to do that exact same thing 2 more times. So I'm going to fast forward myself doing that, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back. All right, so lastly, we're going to go ahead and add this featured article div as I mentioned earlier. So below our last column, we're going to have another div called featured article. And the same thing, we're going to have h4 inside there called latest arrival. All right, cool. What is that? Arrival. And we're going to have a paragraph in there. Type lorem. I'm going to hit tab. I'm actually going to delete up some of this. I think I scaffolded out. And then lastly, we do need our handy dandy link inside of that, which is going to go nowhere and called read article. So this is where I mentioned earlier where this also needs a double chevron. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that from try for free. We copied this earlier from Lucide or Lucide. And let me go find out read article and then paste this in here. One thing I'm also going to do is see the same thing again where it gets that red thing. I don't understand why that happens. I'll just do this manual fix and click save. All right. I think the last thing that we need to do is we need to give the icons a class because so the mockup doesn't show it only shows like the open state, but we're actually going to build this to be able to open and close. So we'll take a little bit of JavaScript, but in order to make the icon basically flip 180 or rotate 180 degrees, I'm going to give it a class. Now we don't have to, but I feel like classes are the easiest way to target specific things. So let's go ahead and find solutions. And let's give this a class of trigger icon. I'm going to copy that onto the resources icon as well. Let's see here. Solutions, where is it? Oh, you know what? I didn't add it yet. Resources, here we go. Save. Let me get a space here. Okay, let's go see what it looks like in the browser. That's gonna be crazy. Let's see here. Our beautiful solutions. This is actually exactly what we want. All right, so let's go and do the same exact thing for resources. For now, I'm going to copy and paste this in, but I will change these later so that we know that they are actually different. As a matter of fact, I will do that off screen and just paste this in. All right, so off screen, I went ahead and typed up a second mega menu with some copy, so you didn't have to watch me type all that stuff out because I don't want to waste your valuable time. So now let's go ahead and go to the browser and see where we are. So now we can see that we have the logo, the first list item, then we have the first item that actually triggers a mega menu, and we have that mega menu below. And then the same thing for resources. And then we have the other ones, pricing, contacts, and then our call to action, try for free. So we are almost done with the HTML. I want to add two more things just because I always forget these two things. The first one is that I mentioned that we're going to be having a little bit of JavaScript inside of this. Let me go ahead and add that script to the end of the document right before the closing body. So script, src, let's just call this main.js. Side note, I recommend using TypeScript by default, but for the sake of this video, I don't want to make it too long. We're going to use JavaScript, but I highly recommend making TypeScript your default go-to for any kind of front-end projects that need JavaScript. All right. The other thing I want to do is, this is probably personal preference, but for these buttons, first off, they need classes, and they also need an ARIA expanded attribute because for accessibility, you want to make sure that the screen reader knows if this thing has triggered an expandable menu. And thirdly, I also want to give this a data attribute, which will let JavaScript identify it. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Let me go find solutions. Let's give this a class of navbar link. As a matter of fact, all of these links need this class because I mentioned earlier they're all going to be styled the exact same. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this onto all of the links. There's that one. Let's see here. We also need this on this button. We also need this thing on this link and this link. So those should be good. Let's see here. Okay, so I mentioned that, and then we also need ARIA expanded. I'm going to make this equal to false because the default state will be false. It will not be expanded. I'm going to copy that down to the other mega navigation trigger. Beautiful. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, now technically in JavaScript, I could just write, give me all the buttons that have this class and then add some functionality that way. I liked having data attributes to keep my JavaScript separated from my styles. So I'm gonna do data dash nav dash trigger, and that's it. I'm gonna copy this to the other one. Now in JavaScript, I can query the document for elements that have that data attribute on them, and that'll be how I'm going to select these buttons and then add some events to them. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste this on my other one, and that should be it. Now we get to what I would argue is the best part of front development, and that is the styles. But let me actually give. First off, I never added a class of navbar to my nav, so I'm gonna give this a class of navbar. And the other thing I never did, I never gave our LIs a class either. I don't know what's going on with me. Navbar. Let's just call this navbar item. I'm gonna copy this onto all of the LIs. I think I missed a quote there. All right. And I believe that it's just these outside ones. Navbar item, navbar item, navbar item. And then I also want to give the navbar items class to the owner of our list, the parent. I click save, navbar items. Let me go ahead and click save there. And before I get too far ahead of myself, let me make sure that the nested. Okay, I think we're good. Item. Okay. If something's missed, we can always come back in the future and fix it, but I think we're good. So now let me go ahead and open up our style sheet and let's get cracking on some of these styles. So, I tend to use layers when it comes to CSS, and given that this project is going to be somewhat simple, and that there's not any internal pages, it's just navigation component, I'm only going to have 2 layers probably, a base and then a component layer. In larger projects, I would normally have a lot more layers, notably a reset layer, which I'll paste in all my CSS resets in. But again, the project this size, I'm not going to do that. But just know that I'm a big fan of layers and I highly recommend using them whenever possible. But first things first, let's go ahead and add some of our global stuff to the root. Starting with the font family, which if you remembered, we call this Hankin Grotesque. Again, I don't know if I'm actually pronouncing that or not. Okay, not, and I tend to be verbose with my CSS custom property, so I'm going to do font family, and that is going to be Hankin Grotesque, and then the fallback font would just be a sans serif font. Sans serif. All right, so I mentioned earlier, speaking of fonts, that we can use, that I'm using a variable font, so I'm going to go ahead and declare, I think just 3 font weights in the beginning. Looks like we have like a normal one, and then it looks like we have like a medium one, and then an actual bold one. So I'm gonna do font weight boldest. Now this number can be anywhere you want to between 100 and 900. This could even be 416 if you wanted to. I'm gonna keep it super simple and do 700. I'm gonna do that trick I showed you earlier in VS Code, where if you hold Shift and hold Option and push down, you can copy the current selection down to a new line. So I know I want 600 and 500, and then bolder, and then bold. So this should be enough to get started. We might adjust this later on. Next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and declare some font sizes. Now, again, I don't have the actual design file, so I'm kind of just basing it off my best guess and a little bit of trial and error. So that might not be perfectly exact, but just bear with me. Font size base. Whoops. Now I'm gonna do one rem here. This should be to 16 pixels because I have not changed the document default base font size. I'm also going to do a medium and a large font size. So I'm going to do a little trick here because I want to keep this in rem, but I want to calculate a value based on the pixel value that I want. So check this out. If we do calc and if we do 20, because like I want this to be 20 pixels, we can do that divided by 16, which transforms that into rem. And we can times that by 1 rem. So now we know that this, whatever this will be, whatever rem it's going to be, will be 20, will be the equivalent of 20 pixels. And to me, that's much easier to understand than doing something like font size, then 1.125 rem, right? Like, I mean, this makes sense, right? If you've done it for a long time, but this is just easier to read, and I'm all about legibility. I'm much bigger on legibility than I am being succinct in my writing, right? It's the same reason why I write my custom properties out like font dash size, right? Because I don't write dash FS. There's nothing wrong with that. I just personally enjoy readability over everything. So same thing, shift command down. Let's go ahead and create a large version, and I want this to be 24 pixels. We're going to save that. I think that should be okay for now. So one other thing that's can be difficult to do if you don't have the design file is getting colors, right? So I'm actually on a Mac, and there's this super nice app store application. It's just called Color Picker. It looks like this. If I can bring it over here. All right, yeah, there's this really handy app store plugin called Color Picker on the Mac, which I use all the time to get colors from mockups. So I'm going to use that here. Unfortunately, I have this thing full screen. I can't actually drag it over here, but I will leave a link in the description to the exact plugin this is. But I'm going to go ahead and click on the color select like button in the plugin and start plucking out my colors here. So let's take this purple. And maybe for this, I'll just fast forward this. You have to watch me type all this out. So I will see you on the other side. All right, so we are good with that. We have our font weights. We have our colors. Let me just go ahead and move my font weights down a bit. What do we need? We also need some border radius here. So let's do border radius. I'm just gonna do 1.5 rem. I'm not exactly sure what the exact ratio is, but I'm just gonna kind of eyeball this one. I'm also gonna add in a box shadow here. Let's go 0, 4 pixels, 10 pixels, 0. And so one reason why, something I glossed over, so my color properties, notice how they're not wrapped in any color mode, right? I don't have these wrapped in HSL, for example. And the reason why I don't have that is because I want the flexibility of using the alpha channel, right? So I want to be able to, if I ever needed to, have this primary dark color just with a specific alpha channel, just for example, right? So it's, what I mean by that is if I had like color, I want to be able to do HSL color dark dash or forward slash 0.5 right now. This will be this exact same color based dark, but just add 50 opacity because this is the alpha channel. Because this just kind of scaffolds out into, where's color based dark? This scaffolds out into this, which is valid CSS. So we can see this here, right? So that's the reason why I do not wrap my CSS custom properties that are colors in a color mode, because I want to have the flexibility of using the alpha channel. So with all that being said, let me go to box shadow. But in order to actually use these colors, you got to make sure that you remember to wrap that custom property in whatever color space you want. So I want HSL. I use that very often. So I'm going to do HSL, I'm gonna open this up, and for this I want color base dark. And then I want it at a 0.05 opacity, right? And that is like the beauty of using colors without wrapping them in a color space. So kind of quick tip there. So lastly, I'm just gonna have a few space tokens. Again, I'm not 100% sure what these numbers are because I don't have the real mockups. I could do a screenshot and kind of guesstimate in pixels what it'll be, but I found that I'm not sure if it's worth the time. Right? I think eyeballing it's pretty good for stuff like this, but you don't have the actual design in front of you. So I'm gonna do space dash small. We're only gonna have 3 of these, so I'm gonna do the same trick we used earlier. We're gonna calculate whatever 10 pixels is. So convert that into rem times 1 rem. I love this trick. I'm gonna copy this down. I actually want this one just to be 1 rem by itself. Make sure we add semicolon, I'm gonna call this medium, and then actually for the large, because I'm gonna use a copy again, I'm gonna copy that one. And for this one, I want this to be the equivalent of 20 pixels. Okay, I think we are good now with all of our custom properties. So now let's go ahead and add our base layer. So layer, base. Let's go ahead and open this up. Now let's go to our design, see what we have so far. It should be the exact same, right? Okay, beautiful. I still do this box sizing thing, so there, after, and before is going to be box sizing, border box. What am I doing? I'm almost put content box there. And then let's set up some like large global styles here, right? So let's do body. Let's give us a height of 100 viewport height. Background color is going to be, so remember, background color. Remember, we need to wrap all of our variables in a color space in order to actually have them visible on the page. So I saved a color background custom property, so this should work for us. Let's see here, HSL color background. I wonder if, let me see here, styles.css. Does that apply? Maybe I just can't see it because it's so opaque. Body. Oh, I didn't put var. What am I doing here? See? var color background. Okay, there we go. Beautiful. Now there's that subtle change. Happens to me all the time, by the way. Font family. This is going to be the same thing. Var. This is going to be font family. You just see that switch. Beautiful. We're getting closer and closer. Font style normal. So this, I'm only putting this in there because the Google Fonts snippet had that in there. They also had another property which was called font optical sizing, and that was set to auto. Again, I'm not 100% positive what these do to be 100% transparent, but because the Google Font snippet had them, I'm going to go ahead and add them here. Last thing we want to do is let's set a global color on here. So HSL var color base ink. That should make the default text color be like that light gray. And then we're going to do font size. It's going to be var font size base. Okay, beautiful. That should help. All right, we're getting there. Slowly but surely. All right, so let's go ahead and fix up some of our buttons a little bit. We need to take off some of the default styling on there. So let's do padding of 0 for the buttons, and then we're also going to make the font family inherit, because it's probably hard to tell, but the buttons are not actually applying our applied font, right? Let me go ahead and inspect this in resources. If I click on a button, if I do the computed, if I go on the font family over here, we can see that it's still Arial. Certain HTML elements do not get global styles. You need to actually tell them to inherit them. So if I do font family inherit, click save, we can see now that button does look like the rest of them, right? Which is pretty nice. All right, so now let's go ahead and create styles for our links and our buttons. All right, buttons. Text decoration, we want none. Let's get rid of those underlines. Let's do display inline flex. I like doing this for elements like this, mostly to align links that have icons after them, which some of ours do. So I use this. So we can do align item center. That will actually center our icon on our text at our buttons. We click save. We can see that. And then the same thing here. I want to do font size inherit. Now think about it. Actually, I see do not need this on this one. We'll just have it on the one below. That should be good. Let's see here. Actually, you know what? That's not font. That's font family. There we go. We need both of these. Okay. All right. Let's add some styles on our list. Just get rid of some of the extra default padding that they have. So list style. It's going to be equal to none. Then margin. Whoops. Margin 0. And then lastly, padding. Oh my goodness. I have so many typos today. Padding 0. That should line these up. Okay. And then let's style the H4s. Now it's kind of weird that I have not written styles for like H1, H2s, H3s, and H4s. Videos like this where I'm only writing styles for a specific component in isolation, I tend to skip over the other headers that come before, right? I don't have any H1s in this document, so I'm not going to write styles for H1. But just know that in a regular web project, you're going to have H1 to H3 all the way through H6. So those styles will only be written. So, but in my case, I'm just going to write H4 here. And I'm gonna do a font size. Let's do font size medium for the H4s. And let's do font weight. Now we can use that other custom property, font weight bolder. I think that's what we want. And let's do font. Let's do color. This is going to be equal to HSL, oh my goodness, var, color, base, dark. All right, beautiful. All right, pretty good. All right, so I think that's all for our base stuff. Let's go and get into the actual component, right? So because I'm using layers, again, this is a tiny project, but just to keep stuff consistent, I'm gonna do layer. Let's go ahead and describe the order that these things should come in. So I want this to be base first, and then the layer called components. All right, so let's go ahead and create that new layer. Layer components. All right, and it's going to be like the meat of all of our styles that are specific to this video. So let's start at the top. Let's start at navbar, and we want this to be. So again, for the sake of this video, this is just a demo. I'm going to just manually put in a hard-coded width here, but just know that this will probably be driven by the content. I was at 1200 pixels with a max width of like I say 90% of the page. So it wants to be 1200, but it will not go above 90% of its container. So also let's center that. Let's do margin inline auto. If you don't know, margin inline is based on language because we are writing in English. It is from left to right, and margin and padding block are going to be top and bottom. So margin and padding inline is left and right. Margin and padding block is top to bottom. So we're going to do margin inline auto, which is the same thing as writing margin left auto and margin right auto. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. We're going to display flex here, which gets us actually quite a bit of progress. We have 2 stacked navigations, which makes it look weird. And I think what I might actually do is just to make this, keep this clean, let's find these. Let's find the navigation. Let's find this class, and let's just actually turn this off for now, just so we don't get distracted by so much clutter. All right, so I'm gonna do display none here. So I'll just clean this up a little bit. Perfect. I don't want too much stuff going on while we're trying to figure out our other styles, basically. So, all right, we're good with that. Let's do padding inline. We're gonna do var here. This is going to be space large. Okay, background color for the whole thing is going to be HSL. Var color. I think I named this base white. Did I? Oh yeah, we got color base white. And click save. Perfect. You're getting there. Justify content. We want this to be space between, because if I go back to the mockup, we can see that there is space. There's an even amount of space in between the flex items. Okay, that's why I opted to use space between, and then align item center, which will vertically align the items within the flex container. So I think the technical term is the is it the axis column or is the other? Maybe it's the other one. I always mix it up. Basically, if it's not one, I try the other one until I get it to work. So we're gonna add a gap here. Let's do var space large, and then let's go and add that box shadow. Box shadow, var box shadow. I think CSS properties are so cool. I love using CSS properties. All right, so we're actually going to give this a position of relative because we want the mega menu that is below to be positioned absolutely to this navbar, right? And we want this centered. Based on this design, it looks like the mega menu is always centered within the navbar, no matter which one is actually active. So that's what I'm going to do in the prototype. So let's go back to our version. And let's style what is next, which is going to be the navbar items. Navbar. Now this is going to be the list items. So var, let's see here, space medium. And then let's be display flex as well. Align items, center, justify content center. Perfect. That's what we want there. Let's see here. So I mentioned earlier that we want to actually rotate this icon when the mega menu is active. So let's go ahead and give this trigger dash icon. I think we named it right. Let's go back and find it. Trigger icon. There it is. So this is the icon that is to the right of the buttons. So I'm going to trigger icon. I'm going to give us a transition because I want this thing to animate as it rotates. So transition. I want to animate the transform property. So transform. Let's give it a 200 millisecond, and let's just do ease. I would normally save this transition as a custom property, but I think that's okay. Just leaving it off for now. This is a small project. And then navbar item. These are the list items that are inside of the UL. I'm gonna give this a flex shrink of 0. Again, there's no mobile styles for this project, so I'm kind of just winging it. I'm actually not gonna build out a mobile version of this. So I'm putting flex shrink just temporarily. There's nothing weird going on for the full view, but just know that the mobile version probably will not have flex shrink 0, and it's probably will be a hamburger menu, but I won't actually build that for this video. All right, let's bring a style on these links. This is like one of the biggest elements on here. So nav bar link. All right, we want border none. This is for those buttons mostly. We also want a background color of unset. Now, I did not put none or transparent because I just want to unset the default styles. Transparent will work here. None will probably also work here. I'm just gonna have it using unset for so that I want to remove the default styles from. So I'll take that for what it's worth. Let's give these a font weight of var font weight boldest, because these do look pretty bold. If I go back here, I think these are the boldest. I think these were actually probably similar font boldness, but one's just bigger and darker, so that looks bigger. But I believe they share the same boldness there. So there's that. Let's see here. Color. I want this to be inherit. We should fix these up, right? Okay, perfect. One thing I'm noticing, okay, yeah, so there's no gap here. I never renamed this from small to large. Let's go ahead and change that from space SM to space LG. Let's see here. I think we need some gap in between these navbar items. Let me inspect this really quick here. Navbar items. All right. Give me a gap here. Var space large. Yeah, there we go. That's much better. I don't know why I couldn't read that earlier. All right, let's continue on with our link styles. Text decoration, none. We also want to do font size is equal to, I'm just going to do font size equal to font size base, because I believe that's what we have, one rem, beautiful. We're just going to do cursor pointer, make sure that thing shows up there. Display of flex, align item center, gap, let's give this a gap of bar small. I think that is the space in between the item and its icon. And then let's give this stuff some padding. So var space small on the top and bottom, and left and right we want var space medium. Okay. Okay, so I am noticing that the call to action that is in the featured article class is actually not coming through. And that's because currently I'm setting that color to color-based ink up above, and this selector is just more specific than the selector here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this from color base ink to just inherit. So it'll accept whatever color is passed down to it is what it'll be. And there we go. Now we can see that's what I expect to get here. So I see we have a typo. Let me go ahead and fix that. Let me go find that company. Beautiful. And then the last thing I'm noticing that we are missing is there's too much space on these H4s, right? So if I bring this down just a little bit, and then let me, also it's not centered, so let's fix that too. So H4, I never got rid of the default margin on there, so let's go ahead and fix that. And let's go ahead and center this thing while we're at it. So to center it, let's find, okay, this should be justify self center, not start. Perfect, that's what we want. And then let's go ahead and find our default H4 styles. Let's do margin of 0. Okay, that looks much better. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and add the last part, which is going to be the JavaScript. And before we do that, let's remember that we need to change the array expanded to true to open it, and then we need to get rid of this active class on the nav submenu. So I believe I already added the JavaScript reference. I did. Beautiful. All right, so now let's go ahead and pull this off. Let's go to our sidebar. I'm just going to create a JS file with the exact same name. Let's just make sure that it works. Hello, YouTube. Beautiful. We got an alert there. All right, so let's delete this. So what do we need? So we need a reference to all of our nav triggers. In this case, it's going to be these two. I mentioned earlier that I saved those with a data attribute. So let's do const. We can do nav triggers. Let me get rid of the sidebar, create more space. You want to do an array dot from document dot query selector all. And it's going to be everything that has the data attribute of data dash nav dash trigger. And to prove that works, let's console.log this nav triggers. Let me go ahead and inspect. I'm just going to move my inspector to the bottom. Bottom, there we go, elements, console. There we go, we have an array with 2 items in it, and this is exactly what we want. We want these 2 items right there, so perfect. All right, I'll keep this open. We also need a reference to our submenus because those will need to be touched by JavaScript as well. So we're gonna do const, let's call it submenus. Same thing, that array dot from document. So if you didn't know, if you do document dot query selector all, it actually returns a node list, not an array. I think in this case, it wouldn't make a difference, but it's just common practice for me to change that into an array. And those they have the class of navbar submenu. And again, just to be sure, let's go ahead and console.log it to make sure that we are actually getting what we want. I don't want that. Submenu is perfect. That's what we want. Beautiful. All right, so what do we want to do? Well, one thing I like to do before I do anything is to go ahead and add event listeners to our triggers. So let's do nav triggers dot for each. And for each trigger, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do a trigger dot add event listener, and we're going to listen for a click. And then when that happens, we're going to run a function called handle toggle menu, which we don't have yet. So let's go ahead and create that. Let's create a little bit of space here. Const handle toggle menu. So what is this function going to do? Well, it needs to do a handful of things, and one thing it for sure will need is the event that is passed to it from the event handler. All right, so let me just console.log the target here. Not target, event. If I click on like solutions, for example, I should get a reference to that event, which has a whole bunch of information about it. One of the important things here is that we need to actually, so check this out. If I do, let's take a look at the trigger. All right, let's go look at the target. It's going to be event.target. And then let's take a look at the current target. Event.current target. Let me get rid of this for a second. Let me console.log target, and then let me console.log the current target. So these two are different, both very important and have different use cases. So if I click on, let me click on solutions right quick here. We can see that these two are the same, right? I clicked on solutions. This first one is the target, and the second one is the current target. All right. So that's fine. So, but what if I clicked on this SVG? All right, what do you think will happen? If I click on it, see we're actually getting different things now in the console, because like this is the target, but current target is still that button, right? So this is important. So in JavaScript, the event.target is the event that the mouse clicked on. All right, so that can be useful, but in this case, we want current target, and current target is the element that triggered the event handler. All right, because these buttons have an event handler attached to them. When we click inside of them, some JavaScript bubbling happens, and this is the element that is returned to us as the current target. So very important to know there. It's pretty fundamental JavaScript stuff, but just know that you almost always want current target when you're trying to do something based on an event listener. So it's very important to keep that in mind. So I'm going to delete target for now. I'm just going to clean this console.logging up. And so let's just call this trigger. This is a reference to the current trigger, which is going to be the button that was clicked on. We also want the sibling, because in our HTML structure, the nav is actually a sibling of the trigger. So this button is the trigger. We want to do something with this nav, which is a sibling. Okay, so I'm going to call this const sibling. All right, we also need a reference to the sibling. So let's do event dot current target. Actually, you know, we can actually do a shortcut here. We can just do trigger dot next element sibling. And if we log that, we should get that navigation menu here. Console.log sibling. Let's click, and we are getting that nav submenu, and we are getting the one that's right after the current clicked on element, which is pretty cool. Gotta love JavaScript. All right, now we want to do, well, we want to make sure, we want to check that the current trigger, if it's active or not, because if it is already active, we actually want to close it. And if it's not active, then we want to close all the other menus and then open the one that was clicked on. So let me explain. So we can check if the current trigger is open by checking the ARIA expanded attribute on it. So let's see, trigger is active. It's going to be equal to trigger.get attribute, and that's called ARIA expanded. Now, just for fun, let's console.log trigger is active. And if I save this, I should get false because it is currently not open, right? It's at a closed state. So what we can do is we can do if As a matter of fact, true, this needs to actually be if it's equal to true. And I believe it needs to just be a string. Maybe it doesn't matter in JavaScript, but okay. So now we know that if the array expanded is equal to true, then we know that this trigger is active. So if trigger is active, what do you want to do? Well, we want to set that one to false, and we can do that with the set attribute method in JavaScript. Attribute, we want to set aria expanded to false. All right, let's check that in the DOM here. Let me go ahead and click on this quick, and then so currently it's false. If I click on it, let me see. Oh, you know what? It's going to be false because we're actually switching it from false to false, so it's not going to do anything. But let's do an else. We're going to need an else too. Let's do the same thing. I'm going to do the same copy shortcut. I'm going to call this true. So now we should see, if I click on this, this should turn to true. Boom, true. Okay, all right, perfect. So let's go back to the first if in JavaScript. What we're going to do, we actually want to make this sibling, which is that nav element. We want to give that a class of, actually we want to remove the class of active, right? Remember? So if we click on one that's currently active, we want to close that one. So sibling.class list.remove, and that class that we decided it was called active. So we want to do, if it is not closed, well, we actually want to do sibling.classList.add. We want to add that active class, active. So this should kind of work already. If I click in here, if I go to solutions, boom, look at that, beautiful. Now something we're going on to where if I click and then click away, like it's not going away, right? And I think what we need to do here is we need to fire a function that will just, whenever you click on a target that is not active, it needs to close all the other menus first and then open the current one. So to do that, I'm going to create a function called close all menus. It's going to be an anonymous function, or it's not an anonymous function. It's going to be a function that takes no arguments. I'm going to call this nav. I'm going to do add triggers dot for each, and then for each trigger, what do we want to do? Well, we want to do trigger dot set attribute aria expanded. We want to set them to false, and then we want to loop through all the submenus too. Dot for each menu. We want to get rid of these two. Menu dot class list dot remove active. And now if the trigger you're clicking on is not active, we want to call that function. So close all menus. I'm going to save this. This should be better. If I click on solutions, boom, look at that, lovely, like butter. And notice how when we dynamically open and close the menu, the caret is doing a nice smooth rotation. So that is pretty cool. And that's pretty close to being done. I do want to go through one more quick thing here, and that is checking your work with Mac's VoiceOver. Now, I'm not sure what the PC alternative to this is, but on Mac, if you hold, I think Command and click F5, it will open. Let's see here. See if you can hear this.
Menu bar. Let's build this thing. Dribbble navigation. Web content.
Beautiful. So we can tell that
you're currently on the toolbar item palette.
So we can check our work now. If I tap through this.
Bar. Let's build this thing. Dribbble navigate link. About us. Solutions. Collapsed button.
Beautiful. So if I open this up now.
Your solutions. Expanded button. Link. Test link. Link. Test
Beautiful.
link.
So let's turn this off. Command F5.
VoiceOver off.
So I won't go into super depth into the VoiceOver command or the VoiceOver tool in Macs, but it is extremely important and extremely useful to kind of mimic what it's like to use your web app with a technology that uses Assistant. So highly recommend that. So if you found any value at all in this video, please do your boy a favor and subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of stuff like this here. One of my favorite things to do as a front-end developer is to take mockups and to turn them into real projects in the browser. So if it's something you're into, do your boy a favor, subscribe, and until next time, see you around.